Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, and welcome to the Castle Morpeth Local Area Council and Planning meeting here at County Hall on Monday the 13th of September. We'd just like to remind everyone that the meeting is being held in a COVID-safe environment, and it is available to view on a live stream through YouTube Northumberland TV. Members are asked to keep the microphones on mute unless speaking. And can I just remind all members to turn their mobile phones off, or at least have them on mute so they don't go off during the meeting. Thank you. So, first of all, do we have any apologies for absence, please? I know I've got Councillor Dickinson. Do we have any others?
I've received apologies from Councillor Darwin and Councillor Sanderson.
Any from the floor? No, thank you. And then we move on to the minutes of previous meetings. There are two sets of minutes to go through. The first one being the 12th of July, 2021 is circulated. Can we confirm these as a true record, please? Thank you. And the second set are from the 9th of August, 2021, which was purely a planning meeting. Can we confirm those as a true record as well, please? Everyone agreed? Lovely, thank you. And do we have any disclosure of members' interests, please? Yes, Councillor Towns.
Not really a disclosure of an interest, but just to be absolutely transparent on the planning application today, I have spoken to the applicant's agent on this.
Thank you, Councillor Towns.
Sorry, I should add, I obviously did not express a view either way.
Likewise, Chair, I've also had representations from the developer, but again, I've not expressed any view on the matter.
Thank you. So you'll both be taking part in the meeting. Thank you. Do we have any other disclosure of members' interests, please? Nope. Okay, thank you. At which point we then move on to the determination of planning applications. So what I want to do is just quickly go through the process as we usually do. First of all, can I just check everyone has seen the site videos? Yep, everyone happy with that? Lovely, thank you. I will introduce the application, and then the planning officer will present the report following any updates or changes to the recommendations. We will then have a short recess at that point because there has been some updates to the report in front of you. We are just waiting for the paperwork to come up, and just to ensure that every member has had the opportunity to fully read those. So there will be a short break to allow that to happen. Then we will go to the public speaking, which we have one person for the public speaking, and they will be allowed up to 5 minutes for their presentation. At that point, we will then go to questions to the planning officers from members. And then we will move to the debate following a proposal and a seconder. Once that debate is concluded, we will then move to the vote. Thank you. So the application before us today is application number 21/000236/FUL, which is the redevelopment of existing land and buildings and the erection of 7 number of dwellings, and that's at land north of, and I apologise if I pronounce this incorrectly, is it Catadine? At Fulbeck, Morpeth in Northumberland. And just before I bring Richard in, I just want to draw your attention to page 43, item 9. Make sure I have got the right page. And you'll notice that it says this application be granted permission. That is a typo error, and it should read that this application be refused permission subject to the following. And at this point, if I can hand you over to Richard, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just before I start, there's also a few other typo errors within the report, paragraphs 7.4 and 7.5. Just to clarify, the aim of the paragraphs was just to confirm that it can't be argued that the site is not considered to be within an isolated location in reference to paragraph 80 of the NPPF. This is due to its proximity to the existing farmhouse. As the site, however, is not located within a village itself, it therefore would not be included within the definition under paragraph 79 of the NPPF to be able to support services in nearby other nearby villages. So yeah, just to confirm, that was what the aim of those paragraphs were, if that's not quite obviously clear. So just to begin the presentation, I've got the location plan, which shows this is obviously for the erection of 7 dwellings north of Katedy and Fulbeck, and the site is a small cluster of buildings, including a farmhouse and outbuildings located north of Morpeth and also east of Fairmoor. The proposed site is adjacent to the existing farmhouse known as Katedy and is bound by agricultural fields with a line of trees to the north. The site has 3 outbuildings associated with the original uses of farmsteading, with hard standing and an area of Greenfield land. The narrow building site to the north of Katedy currently has permission for the partial demolition and conversion of 2 dwellings via the prior approval procedure under Class Q of the Permitted Development Order. This route allows for the conversion of agricultural buildings that are of permanent and substantial construction. This part of the site to the north where this building is also has permission under a certificate of lawfulness that identifies the barn to be a mixed use sui generis, I think with equestrian and agricultural use. There are also 2 buildings to the south of the site, to the kind of west of Katedy. These would still fall under the purposes of agricultural land and Greenfield land. The site image just shows a clear indication of kind of where the site is located in relation to the surrounding area. The site is to the north of Morpeth bypass, with also you can see the edge of Morpeth there, which is the settlement boundary is also south of the bypass, which kind of follows currently the built form of Morpeth, and I think a few extra the field to the east, where I think there's an allocation of housing. As I say, the site itself lies beyond the bypass and the settlement boundary, and is regarded as open countryside. You can see to the west that is kind of the larger housing development in Fairmoor, which was making use of existing buildings in I think was a former hospital site. There's the proposed site plan. So the barns obviously to the north and the outbuildings to the south will all be replaced. So there will be this 3 rows of terracing here in the sort of north corner, and then 7 detached properties. So there'll be 5 properties along the northern boundary, and then we'll have 2 quite large detached houses there to the south. Especially, plot 2 would be partially on a sort of undeveloped paddock or greenfield site. So move on to the elevations. It's kind of it shows the elevation of all types on the site itself. So we've got the detached dwellings, just gives an indication of what they would look like. There's 70 detached properties and also the 3 terraces. Approximately, I've measured the detached dwelling would be approximately about 7.5 metres high. There's a kind of standard height for 2-storey dwellings. It's about 7 or 8 metres high. No details of the actual materials. However, based on the actual proposals, it does look as though they're trying to use a stone to be traditional or correspond to the existing Katedy house. As in the report, however, it does consider the scale, layout, density and house types proposed would result in an urban appearance that would be detrimental to the site and surrounding rural character. That photograph just shows the access into Katedy, which demonstrates traditional stone appearance. As I say, it has its own access. Just quite close by there, you can still see the side of Cater Dean, and this is the access to the site itself, the application site itself. It is quite hard to see on the photograph, but that's kind of there's a big sort of large barn there on the right, which has the Class Q approval. These photographs show the two access points for the application site, and then also Cater Dean, and then also beyond there you can see the existing bridge that crosses over the Morpeth bypass towards Morpeth. This is from the site itself. Just obviously you can see the barns are presently on site, the outbuildings, a mixture of stone, pole barns, and then the background there you can see just the property of Cater Dean as the farmhouse itself. And that's just a kind of a closer image of the barn that has the Class Q permission for conversion of 2 dwellings. These are just showing the outbuildings presently to the south of the site. You can see kind of further down next to the trees there, kind of opens up a bit. And this is to the sort of west of the agricultural building, where you can see that part of the site is undeveloped, where one of the dwellings will be built upon. So just to conclude, despite the error under the final recommendation of the report under section 9, the application is recommended for refusal. This is for its location beyond the settlement limits, inappropriate development in the green belt, an unsustainable location, impact to the character of the area, a residential amenity, highway safety, and also insufficient information in relation to the ecology and land contamination. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. So at this point, we are going to take a short break just to give members a chance to read the updated information that's just come up now. Has that been handed out yet?
Not quite.
No, we're going to hand that out now. Could we just cut the live feed for a short while, please? Okay, sorry about that short delay. We now would move on to our public speaking. We have one public speaker today who is a supporter, and that's Tim Mickey. You have 5 minutes to speak, and that 5 minutes starts as soon as you start to speak. Thank you. Please use the microphone as well for speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for letting us come and speak today on behalf of my family's planning application at Cater just a very quick background. Cater been in the family since my granddad bought it back in the 1950s. The farm currently doesn't operate anymore as a commercial unit. It's not really big enough to support any families, and everybody within the family has taken a separate career path to agriculture. The application is actually a resubmission of a former application which was put in, and following officers' advice we withdrew it to amend and resubmit. People will notice that actually we've changed the size of the application as a whole, the houses, the design and the location following advice. We've also reduced that down so it doesn't encroach beyond the boundaries of the existing yard, buildings and areas which was granted a certificate of lawful use by NCC planners. Just that certificate actually extends out into the 1 acre paddock to the southwest as well, which we haven't utilised within the application. We've had a lot of discussion backwards and forwards with the officers on the principle of the development and the remaining technical issues. If today we can gather the support of members on the principle of the development, we have solutions to the noise, land contamination and drainage, and therefore would ask members to delegate these and any of the remaining items to their planning officers for final sign-off, whilst we get the necessary reports produced. A great deal of information has been provided in support of this application, which we hope you have seen. One of the concerns that remains is from the council's highways team. The first application, which had a response from highways, only required technical changes. However, the application now is suddenly wholly unacceptable to highways. We don't think and we don't know of any policies that have changed in the time of the resubmission of the second application, so we're not sure what's changed with highways. For those of you that know Fullbeck Lane and the site, we can link directly onto the path along the new bypass, or alternatively simply walk down Fullbeck Lane, like all the current residents do, both of the old, new and the recently developed properties. We don't understand why there's been a change from the first to the second application by the highways team, and why suddenly walking down the lane or linking to the bypass route is unacceptable and unsustainable. We have asked highways and the planning officer without any technical response. However, it's hoped that members who know the site and its location will accept, as all users do, that walking down the lane or using the footpath on the bypass is acceptable and provides an easy connection to Morpeth. In planning terms, we have also looked at the site's location, and it seems to me that the site represents an anomaly in relation to the existing and emerging policies, the MPPF and the site circumstances. We understand that the aim of the MPPF is to deliver more homes in the most sustainable way, whereas the aim of the neighbourhood plan is to harness the growth while retaining local identity and distinctiveness. We believe that this development will satisfy the aims of the MPPF whilst protecting and representing the aspirations of the neighbourhood plan. A lot of detailed information has been provided by our agent, referring to other applications approved along the lane, further out at Fairmoor. The application which Richard referred to at Taylor Wimpey site north of Cater Farm, including supplying plans and demonstrating that this site sits between other major sites which are to be allocated or which have been allocated within the plan. We hope that on balance this development can be supported by the members for the following reasons. The site is previously developed and has an existing permission for 2 dwellings currently. The site will not encroach beyond clearly identifiable boundaries, instead reusing previously developed land under the certificate of lawful use which was granted by NCC. The site will not link settlements together. The development of this site will not undermine the objectives of the settlement boundary as defined in the Morpeth neighbourhood plan. Whilst outside the settlement boundary, the site falls within the settlement of Morpeth and falls between existing site allocations for both housing and employment land. The site is not physically or functionally isolated in relation to Morpeth and represents a sustainable form of development. In summary, the impact of the highway network, both during construction and once the development is completed, should be considered acceptable. Manoeuvring and parking spaces are to be provided, and safe access would be achieved, and therefore the proposals would not have an adverse impact on the safety of all the users of the highway. The proposal would comply with the development plan as a whole and fulfil the environmental role of sustainable development. In social terms, the proposal would contribute to the supply of housing, whilst the proposal would deliver economic benefits. Overall, the proposal would be sustainable development in terms of the MPPF. So to conclude, I've given you the examples of where the planning authority at NCC have granted permission outside the neighbourhood plan.
Stop there, please. Your 5 minutes are finished. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to questions of officers. Does anyone have any questions, please? Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the local member just for this one. It's just along the boundary of my division. My questions really relate to this further letter that we've been asked to look at today. And just to clarify a few points, I did spend quite a bit of time reading the report, and I think given some of the previous issues this committee has had with similar types of developments, I can see quite a lot of effort has gone into to cover all the bases. But this letter does raise some issues, and there's direct contradictions to the conclusions in the report on a couple of things, and I just wonder if we can get some further clarity. First off, this letter is saying the land is previously developed, which I think obviously you might disagree with, or so I'd just like to know quite why the report is saying that this is not previously developed land, despite what we've just heard from Tim as well. And the second question was, again, relating to the letter, there's a line in here saying a site can still be within a settlement even if it falls outside a settlement boundary. And just as a matter of fact, I wondered if officers could give us their view on that as well, please.
Yeah, I'll start off there. I think you're right, there must be some disagreement with what is considered a brownfield. I did check this issue actually with our policy team and also the officer who dealt with the actual previous application. If you can actually refer to the report on the planning history, it's got the actual application, the reference number to the second one to the bottom. That's the certificate of lawfulness. So I did go through this with the officer this morning, just to double check. So our position is that only half the site could be considered sort of brownfield land. So the actual description there relates to parcel A, as sui generis agricultural and D2 use, which I think is leisure, so it must be equestrian use. And then upon building 1, so this was only related to the northern part of the site. So from that decision, that means the rest of the site still is still Greenfield land. So that was what our judgment was based on, and I have to say I've clarified that with a few of the colleagues just to be double sure, because I did notice that they had said it was brownfield land for the entire site. So I have judged this on the fact that it's partially brownfield. So potentially, if it was a smaller site, there could potentially be some way we could look at a smaller scheme. It's just we're looking at the entire application, the entire site in this instance. I don't know if you can.
Okay, I was just going to add a little bit more on that, and members, you may want to take a different view, but we feel clear, looking at the planning history and looking how the site set out, that it is partially previously developed land. But even if we were to consider it all to be previously developed land, remember what the MPPF is telling you that you need to look at. And in that bullet point, which is saying that that is an exception for development in previous developed land, the test is that the development does not have a greater impact on the openness of the greenbelt than the existing development. So even if you were to conclude that that whole site was previously developed, which we say it is not, even if you were to come to that conclusion, you have to run it against that test. So does it have a greater impact on the openness of the greenbelt? And we say, yes, it does, because you're talking about large built family homes on what is currently a green open space. And so that is regrettably the main thrust behind what we're looking at. So either which way, it is a moot point. we're saying it's not previously developed land, even if it were, it doesn't meet the tests of that bullet G in the MPPF, which carries through onto your Morpeth plan policy as well. So we can discuss that further if you want, but you need to be very clear on how you appraise that.
Thank you. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to explore the point that was raised regarding the highways position. The applicant is saying that in the previous application, highways seemed to, with some technical changes, not be objecting, and the current application, which I understand is a smaller application, is saying it's a fundamental issue. So I just can understand why the highways now feel this is an issue.
Okay, Chair. Okay. So, well, the first position is you've got to look at the application that's before you today, and you've got to read alongside that the technical response that's come in from the highways team. It may be that that response is a lot more thorough, because we're always looking to improve and make sure that we are applying and translating the MPPF in the way that it was written and the way that it was intended. So if you consider the highways, what the highways comments have come back in is to say that there are a few concerns that they have, which is why they're recommending refusal. The first one is that it is in an unsustainable location, and that the development would be wholly reliant on vehicle use. So when you look at paragraphs 108 in the MPPF, in your decision making, if I just get that paragraph again. When you're assessing the application, what paragraph 111 is asking you to do is consider whether there's an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residential cumulative impacts on the road network. So that's one aspect, that a test that we often talk about, and highways officers have been consistent on that point to say that that hasn't been met. And the second issue is 112, and it's within this context. Application should A, give priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements, both within the scheme and neighbouring areas, and second, to facilitate access to high quality public transport with layouts, maximise the catchment area for bus and other transport services, and so forth. And there are actually points right to E on paragraph 112, and that's all about you looking at the sustainability of locations. And what the highways officer quite rightly is saying is the applicant hasn't met the tests within those paragraphs of the MPPF either. Councillor Bond, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bainan.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions, really. Going back to highways, I mean, I walk along that route on a regular basis, and through Fullbeck, there's been many houses built in gardens, etc., and bits of land, and probably a couple of 100 yards away from this development, where the nurses' home used to be, there's a large estate being built there. So I can't see how they can be built and highways can bring this in for these few houses, but not all the other ones that have been built. And the other point is about Greenfield, Brownfield site, which we seem to talk about every meeting. There's a site at the top of Fullbeck at the other entrance, which is a large estate now, which was built on a field. This is sort of a brownfield site more than that was, and there's been a lot of other developments in that area around Fullbeck. It just seems that a lot of houses have been built. Highways haven't put the same perspectives into those, and we built a big estate, or somebody built a big estate on a green field within half a mile of that area.
So, Chair, I'm not quite familiar with which large site that we're talking about here. However, I'm almost certain, Councillor Bainan, that those applications, or certainly that larger application, would have been at a time when we were applying the same policies, but there would have been other material considerations that would have come into play that would have made the development acceptable, such as the fact that we hadn't met our housing land supply numbers. So we may have had a shortfall of the provision of housing, and that may have been the main thrust and justification for allowing building on a greenfield site. There may well have been other issues. It might have been that there may have been something else on that site, even if it were just large agricultural buildings. It would have been, I mean, I'm not sure, but you know, what we're saying, there may be other development rounds about, but you're looking at the facts that are before you today. You're looking at what your principal, what the in principle position is in your development plans. We're also giving you an indication of how your emerging plan is looking at these applications that sit outside of settlement boundaries, and that's really your starting place. And if it doesn't meet with your policies, then you can look at other material considerations, but there is nothing here that we would say would weigh in favour of the harm of or the justification of allowing development outside of the in principle policy position, which is not supporting development here. Come back, yeah. Did you want to come back?
Councillor Bain.
Thank you. Yeah, I can understand most of what you're saying. That is going back to the highways, the development, which is a couple of 100 metres away from this development, is a larger development. Surely the highway rule should have come in for that one as well. I can't understand why highways are being so critical on it, with all these proposals against it, when there was a development a couple of 100 yards away. I find the very strange that those highway report.
So the issue with the highways is, all aspects of the highway scheme at the moment are unacceptable. It may be that with further revisions and drawings, certainly what the response is saying is it's hazardous in terms of the highway safety, as visibility displays have not been detailed and automatic traffic counters have not been installed to gather data on vehicle speeds on this road. It may have been the case that on those other applications that work had been done. So that's the first aspect. It may be that that could be mitigated away, but what the highways officer is saying is we haven't got the information that's come in the supporting information here, and so we can't support it in that first principle. Then the second aspect of it is highways are looking at this and they're saying, well, we think if people are to live there, they're going to jump in their car to go anywhere. It feels unsustainable. It is outside of the settlement boundary. They haven't indicated how they're giving priority to pedestrian and cycle movements first, which is what our policies are asking. Again, there may be ways that the applicant could mitigate this, but we haven't got it, and there's not enough there for them to change their mind.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, the assessment's based on the fact there's no pedestrian sort of formal footpath that links the site to Morpeth, which is another reason why they've got an issue with sustainability reasons. I say there's no information to say that there's any improvements to link the site, so that's the reason why it's still a refusal reason from Highways' perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, I thought we went over something like this very similar not that long ago, and if I stand to be corrected, but agricultural sort of steadings, if they're knocked down or reverted back to Greenfield, and they are not classed as Brownfield, is that still the case?
Yeah, that's right. We've been here, I think, a few times on similar schemes. I completely understand the situation where people may think, well, the viewpoint is that it will improve the scheme. It's quite a small scheme. What is the harm? It's kind of looking at the actual policies in front of us and being consistent with how we approach these applications. As I said before, part of the site could potentially be developed. It's been consistent with the aims, particularly of the green belt. The purposes of the green belt is to keep land permanently open, prevent sprawl, and its characteristics are its permanence and its openness. So, and in terms of the settlement boundaries, that's there to sort of protect the encroachment to the open countryside. So you're right in terms of that. If you remove the agricultural buildings, it's still greenfield land. So it's a major kind of a constraint in terms of what you can actually do, unless there's overriding sort of circumstances. So that I think we can see why people could be frustrated by certain applications like this, but it's trying to sort of reiterate the aims of actually what the policies are trying to get across. And if you, I suppose, approve a lot of these smaller sites, where do you stop it? Where do you draw the line? And I think that's what the settlement boundary is to stop further encroachment and the sprawl, basically. So we'll still stick by with what the report sort of demonstrates. So.
Thank you. Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, not to be pedantic, but I don't think I got an answer to my second question from the first time I asked, which, just to repeat, was there's a line in this letter from 10th of September saying a site can still be within a settlement even if it falls without a settlement boundary. Just seek some clarity on your views on that statement, please.
I did notice that. So I suppose it's a general observation that because there's a settlement boundary there, you could argue that depending on the characteristics of the site, is it still in the settlement? I would say in this instance, it's not, because you got that definitive, I would say, cut off from the bypass. I think that's kind of a feature that sort of determines the northern boundary of Morpeth. And then you've got the settlement boundary below that. So you could argue there could be, I mean, I don't want to quote me on this, but there could be sites below the sort of Morpeth bypass that you could say, well, it's not encroaching beyond the major, northern feature. But I think in this instance, because it's beyond the bypass, I think there's a clear distinction of where the settlement ends. And I don't think I agree that it is part of Morpeth. And I think it's further, because there's no pedestrian links, that even further, it's not part of Morpeth.
But we do ponder this question ourselves quite a lot and discuss it with our policy colleagues, because you've got a finite settlement boundary. What would you describe the site immediately adjacent to that as open countryside when it might not feel quite all fields and openness? And to draw a line for settlement boundary isn't just a case of drawing a line where you think you might like it. There's a lot of evidence, and there's a whole plan dedicated to explaining why we draw the settlement boundary where it is. And it is actually a line in the sand, and you do describe those sites sitting outside of the settlement boundary as open countryside or adjacent to settlement. I realise the writer here in this letter describes it as a settlement, and maybe if you lived just slightly off it, you might still feel part of that settlement, but you are not within the settlement boundary. And that's what we're saying is where we want to see development. And what the plans are saying is we don't want to see development on the other side of the settlement boundary, unless it meets an exception, which we do see from time to time. We do try to support those, but this in its current format, this application isn't one of those exceptions.
Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. Just one on, I understand that there's already an existing planning permission for 2 houses on this site. Now, obviously, a lot of the thrust of the objection is that it's the number of houses proposed here is not sustainable, because it's not you can't walk and you've got to drive, etc. But obviously the 2 that have permission presumably they're even less sustainable, because there's 2 of them. How does that work? I understand, have they got permission specifically through a farmstead conversion queue? Is that a queue application?
Yeah, it's class Q, so it doesn't. It's not like a full application where we actually had the chance to assess it on the principle. It's part of the permit development order, where if they can demonstrate they can convert it, then it's kind of given permission.
So the permission, so the extra permission when they applied for that the issues of sustainability had, weren't addressed or didn't need to be addressed?
Yeah, that's not on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Towns?
Sorry, just to go on the bit before, Richard, you were saying there's potential. And I think this is the difference with probably Benridge that Councillor Dodd's thinking of. There's potential for development on a part. Is that, am I right in thinking it's the bit that's north of the road running through the middle?
Yes, so it's,
Or just part of that bit?
it's the site north. Sorry, site north of that internal road. Yeah.
So in effect, if those two detached houses on the southern side weren't there, we might be looking at this differently.
Possibly.
Possibly.
I mean,
I'm not going to get you to determine something that isn't in front of us. I take the point.
We have invited the applicant to have further discussions with us, but, you know, they want to test this scheme, which is fine, and these are our recommendations.
Right, thank you.
Just to go on, I think we still have to look at the openness test as well, though. That's still a key matter. If there's greater impact to openness, then it could still fail.
Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, do we have anyone to move a recommendation, please? Councillor Dodd. Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Jones, thank you very much. And at this point, we now go to a debate. Would anybody like to speak? Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an interesting set of questions and discussion. I think that we need to be consistent here. I'm happy to agree with what's been put by Councillor Dodd and Councillor Jones. I think that whilst the applicant spoke very well, and I'm sure that there's a nice scheme here that will deliver good quality housing, and taking on the sustainability point, but there's plenty of locations where we give permission for these things. I think sustainability, okay, it's part of policy, however, but I can't really see a justification why we would go away from this in terms of greenbelt discussions that we've had previously. I don't think there's very special circumstances. This question of settlement boundary, I think, is quite a dangerous one. If we're saying that, you know, the settlement boundary is quite clear where it is. I think that Richard's spoken well in terms of observing a hard edge as well. You know, that may be that there are future iterations of the local plan and the neighbourhood plan that go beyond that, but that's for the applicant to lobby in terms of that process when it comes about. And I'm guessing that whilst we haven't adopted the local plan, we're getting close to its 5-year reconsultation and all sorts of things anyway. So if they want to try that, then they can. And to a degree, good luck to them if they think they can bring something forward that is attractive and a good place to live. I'll just comment on Councillor Bainen's points on traffic up and down that road. I completely get what you're driving at there. It's at the top of Fullbeck, there is brownfield land. I think that's the bit that we're really debating as to whether this is brownfield, and I don't think that all of it is brownfield or doesn't constitute anything other than land and open countryside in parts of it. So that's my thinking, and that's how I'll be voting.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say? Councillor Bainen.
Yeah. As I explained that to me, but also the highways position. And again, I understand that the developer should come back possibly with more information, but I find that quite concerning that on the highways policy. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to contribute, please? Yeah, I'll take Councillor Bourne and then we'll move to summing up unless anybody's got a burning desire to add anything else.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of very torn on this one. I can see it's not a horrendous development compared to some of the things that come before this committee with recommendations for approval. It's sort of sad that this has come with a recommendation for refusal because, I think it has the hallmarks of a not unreasonable development. But we do have, to pay attention to our policies and to make sure that they are set out, consistently, and I want to make sure that we are doing so. I have a lot of sympathy for this application, but unfortunately, there's just too much against it in the policy setup as outlined by the officers to support any successful deviation from their recommendation, in my view. But one thing I would say is that I think this site, is right for a sympathetic, maybe slightly smaller scale development. And I would encourage the applicants to keep talking with the planners to see if they can actually bring something forward that would meet the policy criteria. Because the location, as far as has been set out by Councillor Towns and Councillor Bainan, it is literally 100 metres from a housing estate that was built, recently with exactly the same sustainability issues into Morpeth, Fullbeck Grange, and then we've got the huge Northgate and Fairmore developments just the other side of the field. So, what we don't want is any kind of infill of that green space, but I think the sympathetic, conversion of that farmsteading into a small development would not damage the green belt in the general sense. So I would certainly encourage the developers to keep talking with the planners and see if they can come forward with a scheme that could be supported.
We do have a burning question, Councillor Dodd, so just one more first. Councillor Towns.
It's just as the local member to kind of echo that point. I think for me this is a kind of a head and a heart situation. I know the site well, I know the area well. I personally don't see that much of an issue with having a small sympathetic development. I think Councillor Dodd in previous discussions has said, just having a redundant farmsteading isn't enough. Just having something that's, and I agree. I do agree with that. But we are where we are in the modern world. We're in a very rural county. A lot of these smaller farmsteadings just aren't in use anymore. And I don't think the addition of a few houses in an area where there's already some buildings really causes me too many problems. I do think in the future as well, I think as Councillor Wearmouth has mentioned, there'll be a review of the local plan. I think that's in Cabinet, you've already agreed that there will be an immediate review. And part of that, I understand, is because of the change in circumstances with the British Vault development and the opening of the ABT line and the need for more executive style housing and family housing in southeast Northumberland. I'm not sure whether that would extend to this area here, but that might actually in the future be more of a key to the lock on this site if there's other reasons why this housing would want to be permitted. But I've learned a lot on this committee, and as I've said when my first question, I think this is a very detailed report. You've answered my questions. My heart says I should be supporting this, but my head follows the report really because it is very detailed, and I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room in it. But like Councillor Bourne, I think there is more scope here than in other similar situations that we've seen where something could be done on the bit that is entirely more acceptable or is accepted as previously developed land. And I look forward to, if the applicant has the energy to do so, I look forward to seeing an amended application in the future, because I would like to see something at this site.
Thank you. So, Councillor Dodd, just before you sum up, can I just double check as well, your recommendation to refuse, just for clarity, it's on those 8 reasons that are listed there. Lovely, thank you. So yes, if you'd like to sum up, please.
I'll try and be as brief as possible. The rules, if this application was in front of us a while ago, 10 years ago, there would be a striking difference. There is an opportunity here. The planning rules on agricultural buildings has changed, because at one time it was only the brick building that would be considered as a structure. A pole barn or a steel shed would not. So there is an opportunity. The problem, well, you know, where do you go with the last straw on the camel's back on, well, it's just a little bit on the green belt. It's just a little bit. You know, we see this all over. Everybody tries, and fair dues, that's what their land, they can choose to have a go. However, if we pass this to build on green agricultural land in the green belt, then I would have said that nearly every farm in this county would be considering knocking down their sheds and going to build something, because there's some big farms in this county. They would say, right, let's have a look at this, we'll get 50 houses on here. I'm just saying, sometimes we have to refuse for a reason that's further down the railway line. And yeah, I take the point, things might be changing, but they ain't changed yet. So I look forward to the review of our planning policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. Okay, so we have had the recommendation to refuse. We've had it moved, we've had it seconded. When you do give a show of hands, members, could you please keep your hands up just until they have been counted for accuracy? Thank you. So, all those in favour of the recommendation to refuse, please raise your hands. Those who are against the recommendation, please raise your hands. None. And those who are abstaining, please raise your hands. Right. Okay, and that application has been refused permission. We're now going to have a short break just to allow officers to pack up their IT equipment, and for anybody who does want to leave the meeting, they can do so now. Can I just ask, if you have got a mask with you, that you do wear that when you exit the room, please. Thank you. Can you cut the live feed, please? feed, please. Thank you. Okay, the final item on planning, which I omitted before we took that break, was just to remind you of the appeals update at item 7, which is just to note. And with that, can I hand you over to Councillor Bainan for the rest of the meeting? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Julie. Just want to change the agenda slightly. We have the police here, as you can see. We've got Inspector Swan and Sergeant Les Robson, and we just like to put them in first before the officers. Gentlemen, please carry on.
Right. Hello, I'm Sergeant Les Robson. I'm part of the Morpeth neighbourhood team. Just a breakdown in relation to crimes for the past year and incidents. So for Morpeth, the police have received a total of 8,259 incidents, which sounds a lot, but it's actually quite low in comparison to other areas. The basic general has been public safety and welfare in relation to that. When looking at the figures over the past 3 years, our incidents are actually lower than the past 3 years. Now, this might be because of lockdowns and the like. There has been a slight increase previously to the past couple of months, but that's just pretty because nicer weather, lockdown's been taken back, and people are visiting Morpeth probably more. Crime figures wise, in total for the year, 2,307 crimes, which sounds like quite a lot again. However, the majority of those crimes, at least 1/3 of them, are from our 2 mental health institutes and also from HMP Northumberland. So actually breaking down that, that's 1/3 of our crimes gone, and there's only been 1,649 crimes in total from residents within the Morpeth, Castle Morpeth area, which is a very low figure in comparison to other areas of the same type of population. Just in general, in relation to that, our crime figures are actually about the same, but once again, for the past 3 years, but once again, take into account the fact that we've got the mental health institutes there. If you remove them, our crime figures are considerably lower again than everything else. In relation to local issues, we have the mental health hospitals, which, as I've just discussed there, do take a portion of our crimes. However, in the last year, we have arranged to have 2 hospital liaisons attached to the Morpeth Police Station, one for St George's and one for Northgate, and they're working directly with the hospitals, along with doing neighbourhood policing roles as well, building that relationship with the hospitals and looking at problem-solving approaches to reduce the issues that the hospitals may have. And there's been some very good work done by them. In Hadritton and Widritton, there has been some issues over the year in relation to various families, and we've been dealing with them along with Report ASB and off-road bikes. Some of our officers have seized off-road bikes in that location, and our traffic units have been quite involved in the seizure of vehicles involving ASB, no insurance and the like. Other areas for antisocial behaviours being Morpeth Town Centre and Carlisle Park, particularly with lockdown being removed. There's been an increase there in reports of homelessness. We've been working with the council in relation to that, along with the begging issues as well, and spent time doing walkarounds with council safeguarding teams to identify the people that are begging, the homeless people, put in support and help to get them off the streets, to remove the begging issue, and trying our best to obviously alleviate those issues. In relation to antisocial behaviour involving youths, ASB warning letters, youth cautions and reprimands have been issued throughout the year to remove those issues and prevent those problems, along with working with our housing providers. The re-emergence of the nighttime economy in Morpeth as well is coming to the front. Obviously, we've asked for some slight movement in the cameras to cover the change in the location of the nighttime economy. When the cameras were put in, it was originally around about the marketplace, and now it's moving further down towards the roundabout next to the bridge. So we've asked for a slight change with that, just to move the cameras a little bit. We're working closely with our response colleagues to provide that visibility during the nighttime economy to remove any issues and problems, and we're working closely with the licensees to try and remove those, and the door staff as well, so that any issues that come up, we can deal with them quickly and effectively. In relation just to an overview, Morpeth in general is a really safe place to live. When you're looking at the crime figures, we're much lower than everywhere else. Our repeat victim profile is really low. it only accounts for 23% of our crimes, in all fairness. So victims aren't falling foul of crime again and again and again. Again, like as in other areas can happen. And in general, it's a very safe place. And we'll continue to work with that and try and improve the safety of the area as well. Over to you if you want to say anything.
Just as Les made mention there, we have two hospitals that are in the area. We did have one officer that covered both hospitals. However, I requested through my senior management team an extra officer to cover, so we've now got an officer that covers St George's and also covers Northgate as well, and that involves a lot of work at both hospitals, and now we've got cover for those hospitals as well when one person is on leave. It's been alluded to earlier on, there's new housing estates that have been built in Morpeth, and part of our role is to work alongside both hospitals and work within the management of those hospitals to make the local residents feel safe and that problem solving that's required. Crimes in relation to the hospital are different to anywhere else, so again there has been an increase, but that could be down to one particular person that's staying or detained at the hospital at that time. So as Les has alluded to, repeat victims are very low. We have only got 12 repeat victims of crime in the Morpeth area, so that means that I'm quite happy that the team are problem solving around those victims of crime. Crimes are low compared to other area commands, and as Les alluded to, the increase in antisocial behaviour is due to the lockdown being released, and I suppose tolerance really is a lot of those issues that we've had, where we've had people that have been living without use that were walking the streets and hanging in groups. So a lot of the calls that we are getting for antisocial behaviour are actually kids that are sitting, talking and chatting rather than what you'd normally associate with antisocial behaviour. So we're doing lots of work in relation to education with kids as well, and again working with our partners. So just to clarify what Les has made mention there, it is a nice and still safe place to live.
Councillor Julie Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that report, and it's good to hear that Morpeth is a safe place to live. I'd like to also mention that we have Stakeford and Choppington on this committee as well, and this is all about Castle Morpeth area and obviously a bit more north heading up. Chair, can I make that request that we do actually have the police attending for all of the areas that are covered by this committee, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I was just about to say there are councillors here from all over Castle Morpeth area, so really I'm sure you're going to get some questions on that. Before I bring in several councillors who want to come in, Morpeth Police Station, is it opened yet or is it opening?
The actual police station at Morpeth has never closed, so to speak, the actual building. There's been a review, and I haven't got an update yet in relation to will the front office be opening, but as it stands at the minute, it isn't open. However, the cops are still working from there, which they always have been. It's just the public reception area that is closed.
Yeah, there's a couple of times I went in, a few people were going in, and obviously that's the public area is closed, which is the main concern. Right, I have Councillor Bourne, Councillor Wearmouth, Councillor Bourne first. We'll go through everybody.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the team for coming. Inspector Swan's actually been promoted in the agenda. You're actually Councillor Swan, so congratulations on that. Demoted, sorry. Thanks for the reports on Morpeth. Obviously, I am a Morpeth councillor, and I cover the town centre, which is obviously the hotspots where things happen. And one area which has consistently been complained about to me is the underground car park below Morrison's. The residents of States Lane are basically being plagued by racers, antisocial behaviour, sort of alleged drug use in the car park consistently. There is an issue with the barrier not being shut by the supermarket, which they should be doing. But I would be grateful if you could put that on your radar for more regular patrols, because even today I've had another one. Someone's videoed from their doorbell camera lots of antisocial behaviour outside the house, which it films into the underground car park, and which is where people are gathering to, you know, spin their wheels and do donuts and other cool things.
Yeah, we're aware of the issues there, and we have had some proactivity around that area, and there's been some arrests in relation to various things, and youth's moved on, and antisocial behaviour warning letters. However, the other side to that is if there is video footage of antisocial behaviour from the doorbells, cameras, and ring cameras and stuff, then if that can be forwarded to us, we will take action in relation to that, identifying the youths and taking action in relation to it.
Just on that point, I actually emailed the person today and said, can I forward this to the neighbourhood policing team? And they've just replied, said yes, so
Yeah.
I will forward it tomorrow.
Excellent. Forward it to us and we'll take appropriate action in relation to it.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you for that. Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you. So, mine similarly just come in from a resident who's been doing a litter pick. And I don't know that necessarily be able to do much about this, but I'll tell you anyway. Which is between Lowenstein here and Clifton on the road down here on the A197, or I think it's actually changed its number just very recently. And she's been finding an awful lot of security tags with bottles of vodka from Asda specifically. And she's concerned, first of all, that clearly they're being stolen, and secondly of all, they seem to be tossed out of the window, suggesting that either someone's downing it whilst they're driving, or, you know, but they're making a habit of it because it's happened on a number of occasions, and she's narrowed it down to probably Saturday nights. So there you are. If you're driving along there and someone throws a bottle out the window, it might be worth stopping them because it might have a security tag on it as well.
Yeah, I've made a note of that. I'll pass it on, and obviously, where I'm guessing that there's probably shoplifting going on, obviously at Asda, like you said there. So I'll link in with the teams that cover those areas and make them aware.
Thanks for that. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Sergeant Robson, Inspector Swan, thank you for that information. Can I just clarify, the statistics you've quoted cover all crimes?
Yes, they
Right,
cover all the crimes.
Right, lovely, thank you. Although I don't represent, I represent Choppington, I'm not a Morpeth councillor, but I'm particularly interested in domestic violence and in harm to children, child protection issues. And I'm just curious as to what's happened to your domestic violence statistics because of lockdown. Because what we know nationally is that there has been an increase, and I'm just wondering whether you've got any strategies in place to address that, or what's happened locally.
Strategies have always been in place in relation to dealing with not antisocial behaviour, domestic violence. All officers are tasked with taking positive action in relation to any DV incidents they attend. And positive action can take the form of arrest, can take the form of dealing with the investigation and the crime. Our specialist investigation unit, SRU, secondary investigation unit, they take on all domestic violence incidents. So a dedicated officer, trained officer, deals with any investigations in relation to it. In relation to lockdown, I can't give you exact figures on whether there's been an increase or not. There was a belief that there would be an increase in relation to it, and all officers were briefed and tasked in relation to that. And once again, we'll go back to the positive action, filling in the correct referrals, and referring to so when you talk about children, a child concern is put in, and obviously that goes to our appropriate multi-agency hub who looks at the issues and problems as well as the victims of crime and puts the appropriate support in with our partnership, working a partnership approach. So DV and domestic abuse, and obviously the children involved in that side of things, is at the forefront of what we do, and try and progress.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's helpful, thank you. It's good to know that there's a positive kind of arrest approach to these incidents, and also with regard to harm to children and so on. I just wanted to also ask you though about sort of how you work across commands for specific issues. So for instance, in my area, antisocial behaviour with motorbikes, off-road bikers, accessing fields and so on. And I know that it happens in everybody else's ward as well. And I'm just curious as to how we get away from a kind of whack-a-mole approach to a more strategic county-wide response to these issues.
First of all, just because it's important, just go back just to the domestic abuse that you made mention to. We were aware that obviously lockdown, there were people going to be staying in addresses and people weren't coming out and about like they were. So as Les alluded to, we were aware that there was a greater risk Now, my neighbourhood team deal with standard and medium risk domestic violence victims. And what we've done over lockdown is that we were given extra visits and extra contact to those persons that we had at a medium level. So that we're getting extra contact. We've done lots of work with partners. We've done work with food banks, etc., so that we knew or we could get help from other partners in relation to identifying early, victims of domestic abuse. And likewise, we've done exactly the same during the Euros as well, because we know that during football tournaments, especially when the national team are playing, that again there is an increase in domestic abuse, and that's increases even more when England are playing football. Statistics tell us that. So likewise, there was an operation across all of the force whereby we was having contact, and it was contact with safe numbers that we knew as well, so we wasn't contacting somebody if the offender was going to be in the address. So we utilised all the figures and all the facts that we had to have that extra contact and extra visibility and reassurance as well to the victims of domestic abuse. Going back to what you made mention to there about, I cover from Morpeth all the way to the Scottish border, so I've got quite a large area, and rather than work in silos, as you say, we work now as one big organisation. So Les will link in with the sergeant that covers Alnwick, and likewise he'll also link in with the sergeant that covered Ashington as well. We've got one operational order for antisocial behaviour in relation to motorcycles, because as you say, it's well known that if we solve a problem in one area, that those people will move to another area. Yeah. So again, across the board, as a force, we don't work in silos anymore. So we'll have that approach where myself as the local neighbourhood inspector will have meetings with the neighbourhood inspectors, as I say, from Ashington and even further afield, so that we can predict what's going to happen in our area, but also not just a case of dispersing it to other areas, because that doesn't really solve the problem for anybody apart from your own your own area. So we do work as that approach. Likewise with resources as well, we have basically borderless policing now. So if we've got a particular area that has got a particular issue, let's say on a night time, then resources will be used from one area to another to try to combat their area. So the days of everybody working in their own specific silos, the word that I use, it is a borderless approach that we have now.
That's excellent.
Just further that as well, that obviously off-road bikes is a force-wide issue, so we will take the best practices from Southern Area Command, from Newcastle Area Command, going back to that borderless approach, and implement them here, and they'll do the same with us. So it's a force-wide thing.
Excellent. Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo Councillor Foster's concerns about this, that we've had, this presentation every year almost, and we do keep saying that we're not part of the Morpeth Neighbourhood Police, so we would appreciate, our areas being covered as well. But it's nice to hear, that it's a sort of a overreaching approach that they're taking, so that's good. What I would like to ask is, and I don't know if this is pertinent to the Morpeth area, but as far as officers attending parish meetings and giving reports, is that still a priority, or is that just fallen off? Because we don't seem to get it very often in our area. And again, it's the off-road bikes was the big concern, and also speeding. So have you got some sort of update on the operation, is it Operation Madero? I know there's a few roads that I've reported to that for consideration, and nothing seems to come of it. So I'm just wondering what the thresholds are for actually getting something done through that.
And I'll make Les feel uncomfortable here. In relation to your parish council meetings, you should get a regular update in relation to what's happening. Obviously, due to COVID, we weren't attending those meetings in person, but you should have still been getting it via email to pass across to the parish, so to speak. So those should still happen. If there is an issue that's important to the local residents, I'm not a fan of just waiting until we have the parish council meeting. So it's really important that there's numerous ways that you can contact us without having to sit through 101, which can sometimes take 20 minutes. You know, if you go on the Northumbria Police website, you can actually contact your local team. And if you put in there the postcode, then you can actually contact directly Les and his team. Now, they don't work 24/7, but if it's a problem that doesn't need a response straight away, then that's an avenue to go down, and it will be picked up usually within 2 days. The neighbourhood shift pattern is different to the response pattern, whereby the teams are never off for more than 2 days, whereas response cops are off for 4 days, and the reason being is that we're aware 4 days is quite a long time if you need to get contact with us. So if you contact us, the longest it will take would be for you to receive a reply would be 2 days. So I suggest that's a good way to get in touch with us. In relation to speeding, usually those will come to myself or again via the contact your local police. What we would do is we would contact our Northumbria Police's road safety unit. We'll discuss the different options that we have in relation to them, and we'll send either some officers or PCSOs out with a handheld device so that we can see, especially if we can find out what time that speeding occurs, because it usually is at certain times. And that's how we'll deal with it originally. If we can find that there is a problem, then we can identify that it's definitely the case. Then we'll pass it across, and our force policing unit will link in with highways, and we'll look at ways if we can potentially have a van there, the speed van, if the site's suitable for that. So there's lots of different options that we can use, but it's important that those get passed to us as well. And I don't know how the reports that you're getting are actually coming through to us, or if they are.
I've had several come through NCC's Highways Department through Neil Snowden, and I've emailed myself, but we've never had a handheld, anybody out with handheld apparatus as far as I'm aware. Last time I asked about it, I think I was told that it was broken. So, but you know,
we did it as a force during lockdown for obvious reasons. Our community speed watch teams, they were disbanded during lockdown, and as a force as well, Les and his team weren't out as often during that lockdown spell. But if you're reporting something and it's coming through to us, then you should be getting a cop that would turn up with the handheld device, and that's what would happen. So I'm confused and concerned why that hasn't happened in your area. But if you can just pass again what area it is, sorry? Linemouth.
Right.
it's actually Ellington that's been the big problem, and a couple of accidents there as well. But I can get in touch with Les and sort that out.
Well, what I'll do is, I'll obviously tomorrow I'm back in. I'll send an email to the sergeants to cover that area and just make them aware, and obviously get them to get in touch with yourself if that's helpful. I mean, obviously, just covering that area, it borders with the area I cover, and we're aware of some issues in Longhurst, which we're trying to progress. And we've had the speed guns out up there, and we're trying to work with the council to look at potential traffic calming and stuff. So we're not just looking at short term, we're looking at long term as well to try and reduce those issues.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jones, and then Councillor Dodd, and Councillor Foster and Towns. That's the whole gambit.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor Dunn has just sort of picked me to the post here, because the main community safety issue I have is speeding. And I don't know if you can help, because I cover Ponteland and Ponteland West, so it may not be within your area. But, you know, I do have serious problems in the villages like Stamfordham, in Darras Hall, along the Stamfordham Road around Darras Hall, and, you know, from Matford up to the Military Road, and the Military Road itself, Hollow Hill, Halton Shield. I'm getting nowhere. You know, the council itself can put in road safety measures, and you probably know about the council's small schemes. All my small schemes goes on to road safety measures, but I can't stop speeding itself, can't stop the people who just ignore it, but I don't seem to be able to get anywhere via the police. Certainly on Stamfordham, we were told that certainly the van wasn't suitable for Stamfordham. I'm not sure about handheld. I think you have done that at some point, but overall we don't seem to be able to get anywhere on stopping the speeding or taking measures that make them feel that they need to stop. So I don't know if you can help on any of that.
Certainly Ponteland isn't an area that I cover, but I'll link into my my counterpart that does cover Ponteland and make mention to the areas that you've said there. Certainly through lockdown across all the areas that I cover, which is Berwick up to Morpeth, during lockdown there was an increase in people complaining about vehicle speeding, and I think it was probably because the roads were quieter, to be honest. I personally don't like the approach where we stand in a particular area every day from 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock, because people, unfortunately, if they're going to speed, then they'll speed, and the only way they'll stop if they know that we are going to be there. So I like to try to take the approach where we'll be in different places at different times, so that the motorists who do speed slow down because there's a concern that we will be there, not knowing that at 8 o'clock, between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, there'll be cops there. However, it's 6 o'clock at night, I'm safe to fly through the visit. So that's the sort of approach that we use. And again, it's down to education as well. We have a community engagement van that goes around all the villages, and the plan is now, again, that COVID's lifted, that we'll be doing a lot with the fire service and with the ambulance service in relation to speeding as well. And it's educating people, because you're right, it is quite hard to solve the problem unless you are going to put common measures in there, which Les has mentioned too as well. In relation to the van, there has to be a site visit to see if it's suitable for the camera van to be there, and unfortunately not every area in a small village is, so that's why we will tend to use the handheld. But again, if there is a particular problem in a particular area, if you can just let the neighbourhood team know, then we can pass it on to the traffic department as well, because I work closely with them, and we can get traffic cops to go there again with the handheld devices, because having a traffic car in the area certainly slows people down a lot as well. So again, it's highlighting the areas where we have the problems, and we can task. It's all about intelligence policing, so if we get the information coming, then we'll...
I'll keep feeding it. I do know when they reported in Stamford, he did come out with the gun. Then I got complaints about stopping people from speeding, but then you can't win, can you? So I'll just keep feeding you where... That's great.
That is the problem, unfortunately, in the villages. It is usually the local people that are the people speeding. So from a neighbourhood perspective, where we're trying to encourage the community to come and see us and give us information and gather intelligence, that's the people that we're stopping for speeding as well. So it is trying to get that happy medium, but without a doubt, if somebody's going through a village and they are going far too fast, then yes, we will definitely take positive action, without a doubt.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Dodd.
In a similar vein, do you still do or have the volunteer speed watch people?
Yep. Again, through COVID, Community Speed Watch was basically put on the back burner for obvious reasons because of COVID. As a force, we've been looking at volunteers as a whole, and how we're going to get volunteers to basically feel more valued. I say is the easiest way to describe it. So that includes Community Speed Watch. So Community Speed Watch is still going ahead.
Because I've tried to contact the police, because I've got some volunteers for the villages of Belsay and Walton who are up in arms at the minute. And I keep drawing blanks. I get an email from someone, yes, Vera Baird introduced it, now we don't know what the cause is, but I do have some volunteers who would be prepared to sit with a gun for a while. Just, I know you don't nick them, but you sort of get the information of, is it a real speed? Because sometimes it's a perception. And the other, on speeding, do you ever nick cyclists?
For speeding?
Yeah.
I can only say in 21 years I haven't.
Just that there's a few villages now who've got 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And some of these cyclists are doing way over that.
To be honest, I don't even know if our devices would pick up a cyclist, if I'm totally honest.
I know it was a
however, there are
tongue-in-cheek.
There are offences, like you can get an offence called wanton and furious cycling, and there are offences that can be committed. It's a weird offence, I know, but there is an offence there.
Every Thursday night there's road races going on, and they're called cycle events, because then you don't have to do anything about it.
If they're actually cycling events and time trials events, we should be made aware of those events.
On the A696?
Well, if they're deemed to be cycling events and time trials, I regularly get stuff. I mean, you regularly get stuff through about cycling events coming up and time trials events. So we should be made aware of them, and any issues or problems we should have been put across saying they're not the right place to do that.
Right. Finally, Chair, my daughter witnessed it at Waitrose, Ponteal, and loads of drunken youth sitting on the chairs under the canopy on Friday night. Very abusive to staff and abusive to anybody. I don't know whose forte that is, but it always happens this time of year. As the dark nights come in and it's still quite warm. I don't know where to go with it, but
Again, and this isn't passing the buck. Given a question doesn't directly involve me, I'll pass that on to my colleague who covers Ponteland. In relation to the dark nights, again, it's planning moving forward and looking at statistics and what happened the previous years. So we are coming up to having our darker nights operation, which basically targets exactly what you're talking about. It's getting darker, but it's still warm, and you know, we do get an increase in antisocial behaviour at this time of year. So there should be extra. Well, there will be extra patrols in those areas where we know, like we've mentioned earlier, on the bus station in Morpeth. But certainly for Ponteland, I'll make mention to Gary Neal, who's the neighbourhood inspector for Ponteland.
But I would say, obviously, if that's happening, then report it, and obviously a response officer will come down, do for the 101, or alternatively, if you don't think you need to, then web submission through the Force Internet, and it'll be dealt with. Obviously, if it's getting reported, then it'll be dealt with.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon with a few of my colleagues here with regards to speeding. Operation Mondero was brilliant in that quite early on it did come to my ward, which is Stakeford, and it was absolutely brilliant, and as fast as it came it disappeared. Obviously appreciate it's in other areas and we haven't seen it back. We do have community speed watch, but as you explained with COVID etc, it has been put to one side. But one of the big problems in my ward and Councillor Murphy's ward as well, because it's like one big racetrack all the way around, is the late night speeding. And you're not getting community speed watch out at night, you're not getting the speed cameras out at night, the vans, etc. And some of these vehicles are waking people up in the early hours of the morning. Now, I have been very successful in getting a scheme in Stakeford, so when you go over the speed humps as you drive through, it's me you'll hate. I am hated by some now. There's a definite dissent with some people. Those who live on the road where the speed cushions are have said it obviously has made a difference for them. But it's expensive doing that. I mean, that was a scheme was probably about £220,000. And that's just one part of my ward. And if you add the others in and then Councillor Murphy's ward into that, you're talking about a lot of money. And it's just not feasible to be able to do that in every area. So it's what can we do to combat this late night speeding, which leads me into my second part, in that one of the things that probably go on my gravestone, report to the police. And the amount of times I'll say that to people on Facebook, if they come to me directly or whatever, is please report this to the police, or they don't do anything. It's not worth it. Last time I did that, I never heard a thing. And it is public perception. There's no two ways about it. Now, I do understand resources have played a big part in the situation the police find themselves in now. And I also understand you do a lot of work at the background that the public don't see. And you don't have the resources to keep the public completely informed every 5 minutes about what you're doing. So with that, I would say, are there any plans to revitalise something that I think was quite good in its time and it seemed to die off before COVID? Cuppa with a copper. And it's a great way for the public to actually be able to come and see yourselves and find out from yourselves, not from people who they think are just your spokesperson and trying to, you know, pat everything down, but to hear exactly what you are doing behind the scenes, how the information they do provide might not necessarily lead to that one person they've reported speeding being prosecuted, but it could then lead to other people, or maybe even the drugs operation, because I know there's times where there's been speeding vehicles, and when you've got to the end of it, it has actually been drugs related. So it's that kind of thing. And it's literally about how you can relate to the public and restore good public perception, please. Thank you.
In relation to copper with a copper, yes, that will be starting off. Or certainly things that are similar now that we can be back sort of more public facing than we have been through COVID. In relation to the problems that you made mention to about vehicles and antisocial behaviour, not just the speeding aspect of it, we've got section 59 of the Police Reform Act, which is basically any person that's using a vehicle that causes alarm, harassment and distress. So again, likewise, if we can have, if you've got cars that are flying through the village or different areas at certain times and there's a regular time, again, that's when it would be a perfect time just to use our contact your local neighbourhood team. Again, there might be circumstances if you've got vehicles that are racing, that's a 999 call all day long. If you've got two vehicles that you know are racing on a road, then that's 999. So I'm not saying that shouldn't be used. It's just obviously every circumstance is different. But the good thing about Section 15 of the Police Reform Act is that if there's a vehicle that's causing antisocial behaviour, the driver is committing an offence, but that vehicle itself is also basically added to a database. So if somebody else is driving said vehicle, then that vehicle can be seized if they've had a warning or there's a warning attached to that vehicle, and then they've got to pay to get the vehicle back. You've also got offences in relation to noisy exhausts, because although you can go out and buy them, it is an offence to alter a vehicle. So if you've got a Vauxhall Corsa 1.2 that's manufactured with a normal exhaust and somebody goes and puts a noisy exhaust on, that is an offence as well under the Road Traffic Act. So we need to know about it, and we will target the area. And if there is a particular area, then Les and his team, when they're on duty, they will basically police that area and we'll look for those vehicles. There's a database that the neighbourhood teams have with offenders and cars on, and again that also can be passed to our Up Dragoon as well, which is our Northumberland Police's traffic department. So those vehicles would be passed to them, so they'd be on a database, and I can guarantee you that traffic cops love coming to this area, and they like policing this area because it's a nice area to work. So we don't have any trouble in getting our traffic cops to come if there's a particular problem. And likewise, just let us know, and we'll, we will target that area.
Yeah, that's right. Councillor Towers.
You send your traffic cops tonight, 9:30, Morrison's car park, Morpeth. Plenty of parpy exhausts there, I'll tell you. And,
Talk about a TV programme.
no, I'm sick of hearing them from my house. Just a few things, and I think I'm the final person who's got to speak on this. Just a couple of things to bring to your attention. I cover the Pegswood ward. That includes Upham, and there's some issues with the bikes on the bridleways there. And I just said I would mention that next time I had the opportunity to do that. So if we can just bear that in mind. Also, Pegswood Village seems to be a target for these, are they called hawkers? Or they knock on the door and say, oh, I'm a bad lad and I'm trying to do the right thing and sell you some cleaning products for 6 times the normal price. And actually, again, it's about a perception. I'm sure most of these people are perfectly harmless, but people are, they're worried about people knocking on their doors, especially in these days. Sometimes it's quite late at night. There's people knocking on doors after 8:30, which I think is too late. And I just think, and I know it's a question of resource as well, it's just, the police would be very lucky to catch people in the act here, because it's not a reason to call 999. So if it's reported to 101 or it's emailed, it's picked up 2 days later, clearly they've moved on to the next patch. But if something just about visibility and just reassurance in the community, and if we I know what you said about the community van, the liaison van, and things like that, I think are really important. And in fairness, the police do send reports and do attend the parish council meetings I go to, the vast majority. I know they weren't able to take part in Zoom meetings for kind of privacy reasons, etc. But emailed reports were sent. So the parish councils in my area have definitely had all of that. In terms of longest, you mentioned an issue with speeding. I know that a couple of residents, one who works in emergency services, so has better insight on this than most, has made some complaints. I did attend. Well, I turned up for a meeting with the PCSO, who herself didn't actually then turn up. I'm not complaining. I know that things come up from time to time. She did contact me to apologise, and we've set another date. But what I've said to her in the meantime is pretty much what Councillor Jones was saying. Was actually in Longest, the county council has just spent. Martin might correct me if I'm wrong, but the county council has just spent something like 25 grand putting in further traffic calming measures. We've just put in a 40-mile-per-hour buffer zone from the Worrell Bank running down to about Longest Hall. We've updated all the road markings. We put in in fact, extended the speed limit, or made the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit slightly different. There are physical features. There's a chicane at the northern end. Frankly, as a county council, I don't know what else we can do. And what I said to your colleague was, and I didn't mean this glibly, what I said to your colleague was, it's kind of over to you now. We've put the circumstances in place. If people are going to willfully ignore the speed limits, then there's not a lot more I can do about it. What we need is someone. We need the van, or we need someone there with a hairdryer or what have you. So I'm quite happy to have that meeting again and see if there's any more we can do. But we've got flashing signs, we've got chicanes, we've got repeaters, we've got road markings, we've got the zone to slow people down before they even come into the village. To my mind, I think we've done what we can, and really it's over to you guys.
Yeah, in relation to that meeting, I think there might be a breakdown of communication because she thought it had been cancelled. And that's why it's been rearranged and stuff, because there was another gentleman who wanted to come along as well, and there was some stuff there. So so apologies for that. But obviously I was aware of the meeting being cancelled, of what happened, and should rearrange it straight away. Yes, I agree. There's been lots done there. And I think, and we will try our best to do what we can in relation to the speed guns being there, getting traffic there and the like. That is obviously demand commitments in relation to traffic and what their demands are. But the inspector's totally right. They love coming down here. They love going to Amble. They love going everywhere around here because it's a nice area to work. And they do get normally good results as well. What I would say is in relation to speeding in general, sometimes as the inspector put across the well, it's a perception thing, and sometimes people aren't speeding as fast as they actually think. And I think with Longhurst, I think it's been, since all that stuff being put in, I don't think there'd been any, or we couldn't find anything about any of the assessments being done to find out if people were speeding around there. And that was something we were looking at to get an assessment done.
Sorry, if I can come back in. Yeah. I'll agree with you there, and I have actually, I can't remember if I've sent the email or not, but I did say that in an email to your colleague, I did say that I would try and get a speed survey done. But I think you're right about perception. Now, further up the road, and I think this is the people who are speeding are probably local, but maybe not local to Longest, because that's a through road that obviously goes up to the coastal route from Widdrington and Hadston and other areas further north. And so there's a lot of coastal traffic of people coming to visit the beaches, and especially over summer. But the flashing signs in Upham, I get a lot of people in Upham saying the speeding through the village is terrible. And the parish council downloaded, because their flashing signs actually record the speeds of the vehicles. They're obviously not going to be as accurate as your evidential kind of speed camera stuff. But they'll be near enough. It'll be near enough right. And in a 6-month period, I think it was, they recorded nearly 250,000 movements. And you could count on two hands the number that were well in excess of the speed limit being 30. The vast majority were actually about 25, 26 miles per hour, just 4 or 5 miles under the speed limit. You could count on, as I say, one pair of hands, the number that were in excess of 38, 39, 40. And as evidence goes, there's no way I can put that in front of you and say, please send a police car up for a few days because there's a problem. Because the actual empirical evidence tells you there isn't a problem. But residents are saying, what a load of baloney. It's like, well, here's the data.
We find that a lot as well, to be fair. You know, we'll send cops to a particular area, or our PCSOs with the handheld speed guns, and there'll be no speeding, and then we'll get told, well, it's because you're there, there's no speeding. It's only when you're not there. And it's like, that's correct, because to be fair, the only way that you're going to slow cars down really, or make sure they are, is having that visible presence there, which is why, as I mentioned earlier on, we need to get to a position where people are slowing down just in case there's a cop there, not during particular times, because with the best will in the world, if somebody's wanting to speed, if there is no police officer there, then they'll speed. It is as simple as that. So it is trying to have, doing what you've done, as you say, you put those calmer measures in, which is great, and it's still having cops there at different times, but we find it a lot. We get told there's lots and lots of vehicles speeding in a particular area. I've even had cops that go up with an unmarked car and stand there just to have a look, not to catch people out, but just to see. And again, cars are going past certain areas slow, but it is that perception. So it is trying to, I don't know what the answer is to the perception part, is the honest answer.
There's visibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's reassurance that something's being done.
Yeah.
Probably address a lot of it.
And without a doubt, and I'll put my hands up to say that I probably don't go to our media department enough with all the good stories that we do and all the good work we do. And I keep telling myself every few months that I need to do that more and more. So as a result of this meeting, I will definitely do that more and more, and share the good work, because it is true. You know, we all the bad stories usually get pressed or on social media, but likewise the good stories don't. But what I do find, not just particular to Morpeth as well, is we have lots of Facebook groups like Morpeth Matters, and there's one at Alnwick, and there's one up north as well. I've had meetings recently with Alnwick Council and the moderators on those groups to try to sort of get a handle and take posts away when they've reached their limit, or they've had the necessary answer. Because a lot of it with social media is somebody will look at something 3 weeks down the line. They don't look where the date is. They don't look at the location, and they end up sharing it. We had a massive issue with, or perceived issue in Northumberland, that people were going around stealing dogs. We didn't have any in Northumberland, but when you'd done some digging on social media, people from local areas were sharing posts from down in Dorset, down in Suffolk, saying, keep your dog in, people are going about. And when you dig deep and you look and you're thinking, crikey, there is this perception that something's happening when it really isn't happening. So again, it's getting those messages out that this isn't the case. But certainly with antisocial behaviour, before social media, a particular street that was having issues, it would be the local residents that seen or heard it. Now it gets shared on social media. I'm finding we're getting lots of calls saying there's an actual problem, when really, again, you dig down in the data and there isn't a particular area in a particular street. It's just the fact that people are getting that information from social media. We've got a new system now with that is tremendous in relation to identifying all offences. So it's antisocial behaviour, it's youth ASB, it's basically any offence and any type of job that comes in. We can put in a map and it will tell us the hotspots. So again, we can use intelligent policing, because a lot of the time we can get a perceived issue that you've got antisocial behaviour in a particular part of town, when really, now that we've got this new kit, you can actually find that it is actually in a different area of town. So hopefully that's going to increase public confidence as well, because we will actually be in the areas where we're getting the calls. But I say social media has got a lot to do with the perception of lots of different things, including speeding and antisocial behaviour.
Thank you for that. I think we've all had a go at the questions. So, Inspector Swan and Les, thank you very much for turning up, and hopefully we'll see you again in the very near future. But thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for being so gentle.
Right, we go to public question time. Leslie, I think we have 2 questions, please.
Yes, Chair. We have a question which was submitted by Head on Ponteland Branch Labour Party. And the first question was, under the Government's new National Bus Strategy, Northumberland County Council is required to produce a bus service improvement plan with a deadline of 31st of October 2021. First question is, what public consultation is being undertaken to inform the development of this plan and the work of the proposed enhanced bus partnership? And the second question, how can individuals and interested groups contribute ideas for new or improved routes, better integration and other measures to improve local bus services? I did have a response to that from Neil Easton, which is, the Enhanced Bus Partnership consultation is being led by Transport North East and supported by the region's local authorities, including the County Council. The County Council are actively promoting the consultation via news releases, social media and encouraging stakeholders such as town and parish councils to get involved. Both individuals and groups are being encouraged to participate in contributing to the development of a regional bus services improvement plan, and further information on this initiative as well as a public engagement questionnaire can be accessed via the Transport North East website using, and he provided a link. The survey was running until the 10th of September, so that answer was actually emailed out to the people so that they could respond to that consultation. They have since come back with another question, which was, I must say that publicity for the questionnaire seems to have been rather poor. I have been looking into the issue for a few weeks now and have just looked again at the NCC website for information on bus policy, and there is no pointer to the questionnaire. I haven't seen anything in Pont News and Views. I don't recall any information in the annual council tax correspondence or the occasional paper that is distributed. So I would question how serious the council is on consultation. Perhaps this comment could be raised at the upcoming LAC and considered by the relevant officers. So I did get another response. I forwarded that to Neil again and got another response, and he just came back with, the consultation is being led by Transport North East and not by Northumberland County Council. The bus service improvement plan is set against very strict and tight deadlines for submission to DFT, which has affected the ability of both NCC and TNE to effectively engage with all stakeholders at this stage. Once the bus service improvement plan has been submitted next month, we will then have further opportunity to consult and feed in proposals ahead to any intervention being finalised. In the meantime, either myself or someone from Transport North East would be happy to meet with any individuals or groups to discuss any opportunities or concerns they may have. The first question. I do have another question, which was submitted by Morpeth Town Council, which was, can the Town Council be provided with written guidance with regards to NCC's Section 106 protocols, including how best to engage with planning officers? The Town Council believes the early stage discussion is an important step in the process and would appreciate the necessary guidance to ensure requests are being heard at the earliest possible time. Members of the Council appreciate how busy Rob will be, and if we could have the details of a specific Section 106 office, if there is one, and we can raise issues directly with them. We also feel it is now especially important to get this information as we have 10 new councillors which joined us following the elections in May, and they need to have a good understanding of the processes in place. I did have a response from Rob, which is, the new local plan will hopefully be formally adopted during the next few months. Extensive viability work and debate took place during the formal examination process on Section 106 contributions. This will mean there will be significant changes to the way that developer contributions are calculated and secured on sites. We have anticipated issuing revised public guidance when the Planning Inspectorate issues its final report on the local plan. Training sessions will be run with NCC and parish and town council members. We will set out how communities can get involved at this stage. And he will run a session as soon as possible when they hear from the inspector, the town inspector. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Leslie. Petitions, have we received any petitions?
We have not received any new petitions, Chair.
Is any to be considered or received an update on any?
I do have an update, and it was in respect of the Liz.
In respect of the Linemouth Shed Gate, I think.
That's it, the Linemouth Sheds. It was the Linemouth Sheds. And the update was, out of the 8 remaining cases, 4 have been evaluated and are being closed. The final 4 will have their evaluations completed shortly.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Liz. Great. Item 10 on the agenda, local service issues. I see we have a gaggle of officers down there. I wasn't sure what to call them then, but who would like to go first? Martin, Paul, or...
I think it's the 2 area managers first, and then I'll cover the LTP update report
Great.
at the end.
Martin, would you like to go first, please? It's a bit technical for you, Martin.
Is that it? Is it working there now?
Yep.
Cool. I've produced a little report there which I've sent through to Leslie, so it'll just back up everything which I've got to say. I'm not going to too many jobs that we've done and what we've done, just a bit of a repeat from last month. COVID lockdown continues within the area teams. We're still following COVID regulations as best we can. Coopies Field is quite good in relation to being able to offer that for the guys out there. So we are following that as best we can within the areas. That will continue until we are informed by hierarchy that will be relaxed, albeit it has been relaxed countywide. Businesses are still following their own regulations to keep the members of staff safe. So that will continue from our side. We do have a change of signage for Morpeth Town Centre from the old ones to the new signage that's going out this week, and that will be continue to be monitored by the area highway inspector on a weekly basis, just in as and when we place like for like what is missing or damaged, which seems to happen quite often. Reactive maintenance wise, you'll all be happy to know that we've now backfilled our highway maintenance engineer's post. Ali Johnson left, it happened quite quickly, and left a bit of a void there. One of the highways inspectors has stepped up and was interviewed and is now sitting in that post as Lee Dundas, not Lee Baxter. Lee Dundas is now sitting there, and we've advertised for a highway inspector for the western side of the sort of Castle Morpeth area. So obviously Lee's stepping up. It's going to take a little bit of time for him to transfer into that role and take a full direct control of what was happening. So if you could just bear with us while we sort of settle Lee in and get to where he needs to be, and I'm sure we'll get him round and introduce him to everybody who doesn't know him. We're still continuing in relation to the backlog of inspections. There's still quite a few with the 18 months we had on and off of COVID. So the routine inspections are behind, but we are trying our best. I'm getting support from Paul to try and get this done in relation to extra resources and things like that. So we are pushing forward that. Unfortunately, last month, in July, I reported that I was hoping to be on track for sort of third-party inquiries. So we offer 2 types of inspection, routine and reactive. We haven't been able to get up to there for some strange reason, and we are, again, something else that we are looking into. The Castle Morpeth area has been inundated with inquiries. So normally when we're dealing with inquiries, maybe 30 a week for each one of the highways inspectors. Last weekend there was 134 in one weekend for one highway inspector. So we're trying to look into the reasons behind why that is and why we're getting so many inquiries. And we are pushing through them as best we can. But for the obvious, it would show that we are starting to build up a little bit of a backlog there in relation to that as well. And it's purely and utterly just down to the numbers of inquiries coming through. It was Lee Baxter's area, so it's sort of the east side of the county. We do have extra resource to trying to pick that up and trying to get on top of it as best we can. And we are looking in, it may be the fact that it might be duplications coming through or it might be the system is not recording them correctly and then dropping them in, batching them and dropping them in together as a group after a period of time. But it seems to be a lot within that area. There does. So, like I say, we will try and continue to get on top of them as best we can and push forward and balance it out wherever possible. Gully maintenance, same as the reactive maintenance. We are obviously behind because we had 18 months out, and the cycle of inspections, a routine cleansing programme is linked to a time-based system, and there's nothing else more we can do about that. However, we are looking at overall routes and trying to optimise that as best we can and get the best out of our gully programme. We will be looking at that over the next few months to try and come up with some solutions in relation to that. Again, a large number of inquiries are coming through for third-party requests to check gullies. So, you know, it's a toss-up whether we send the highway inspector out or whether we send the gully wagon out to see what's best for that. So reactive stuff, that's where we are with that. Like I say, I'll not go through the list of schemes that we've finished over the last couple of months, but a couple to take note of. I certainly want to take note of is the parking outside of here, and the guy's done a tremendous job. It was put forward to it, and we've pulled it together, and I think it just shows what type of the quality of workmanship that the guys can produce. And also the Goose Hill parking scheme, which is well in advanced stages. There was an issue with some drainage within there, which was reported as being contaminated. So obviously that slowed things up a bit, but we are hoping to get on the ground as sooner rather than later. We're just waiting to be part of that. And like I say, on top, on here, there is a list which Leslie will hopefully pass out to everybody. One thing from me is that we got the green light to go ahead to fill all the posts within the Castle Morpeth area team. We're slightly under-resourced in relation to one reason or another, but we have been given that green light, all them jobs out, and that is is a blessing certainly for the team. So we should be able to crack on and hopefully pull a lot of things round, deliver all the schemes in on time, and that will be not just beneficial for the completion of the jobs, but also for the rest of the team that have been sort of stretched from one side to another. So that is a massive sort of plus in my direction, and also for everybody else's, really, to be fair. So if anyone got any questions?
Councillor Bourne.
Just a quick comment. I can tell how well the scheme at the front of the County Hall was, and the amazing quality, because we did have some disgruntled people on social media moaning that we managed to do such a wonderful job at our headquarters, and maybe we should roll that out across the county. So I think that was a kind of backhanded compliment, but well done.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really happy to hear Martin say that, he's got the go-ahead to sort of bring people in, and that they were slightly under-resourced in the past. I mean, the matter of residents' expectations and the reality of local services was touched on at the last full council meeting. And despite the protestations from the Cabinet Member for local services, I have to say that I agreed with Councillor Hill at the time. Residents do regularly pass comment, either in person or on the street, or at parish meetings or on Facebook, implying that their expectations are not in fact met. So it's really good to see that there's a bit more resources coming in there, and hopefully that will improve things. One of the parish councils in my ward has temporarily employed a part-time street cleanser in an attempt to alleviate problems. But you will appreciate that this isn't a sustainable solution long-term for a small parish council with a very small precept. So, the weeds and the gully cleaner in particular are the things that people come back to us about. So I would really hope that when Martin says that there's more resources being put into there, that this will be the case and that we'll see an improvement.
Thanks for that, Liz. Yep. I think we all agree with that.
Can I come back on that? Because obviously what Martin was talking about was the design and the construction side of the highways. We have reflected on the scale and extent of the highways construction activity. We've got a massive capital programme on highways, and clearly we flex that. We know that we've got a big programme going forward, and that's why we've effectively equalised the areas now, so that Martin's team is resourced to reflect the capital programme that they're intended to deliver. Some of the things you mentioned are more about just revenue maintenance activities, and we are replacing, as part of the fleet replacement programme, the gully tankers that we currently have, because they're coming towards the end of life. We're getting larger gully tankers with some additional jetting capacity on them. But we are going to be looking at the gully tankers and the whole gully provision, because it is an area, I think in particular, that roadside drainage is of concern to us in terms of where that's at the moment. But we need to do that in a measured and managed way to make sure that, you know, when we're making a case for additional resource, we can demonstrate what that resource is that's required, and also what benefit that resource would deliver, because it is about fundamentally needs, not wants.
Yeah.
If we just manage people's expectations, we'd be spending a hell of a lot of money and still not getting where we need to be. So it is about trying to manage need, not want. Yeah, thank you.
Paul. Are there any other, Richard, to Martin?
Thank you. A very trivial one, really, but as you come out of County Hall here and you go up and down on the A197, we've got a lot of debris that accumulates around the centre of the road, and I've had quite a few people now complaining that it's quite sort of slippery if anyone was to drive over it, in terms of lots of little pebbles and bits, and it never gets caught by the road sweepers because they just go down the side. So if at all possible, when the crew's next out, if they could have a go at that, because I can see what they mean when I've gone around and had a look.
Yeah, the road sweeping sort of falls under Paul's area, but areas such as that, it needs to be traffic managed as well, because of the health and safety issue. So, you know, I know the guys look at that and do a fantastic job as best they can. So I'm sure Paul will take that away.
Yeah. Great. Councillor Dodds.
I'll be very brief, Chair.
Yeah.
It's not my division, but I use this road a lot. The road that goes from Ponteland to Throckley. As you enter on the A69, sorry, the first roundabout, if you were heading south, there's 2 lanes, but nobody knows which lane to get in. Could you look at putting on just the white line that says left lane or whatever it is to go down into Newcastle, or the other lane that then takes either across to Throckley or up the A69? Because there's often, you know, people overtake people on that roundabout and it's not. It just needs to look at and a bit of paint. I know it sounds dead easy, but just needs to look at.
Yeah.
We'll have a chat then just to make sure I'm on the right roundabout, but more than happily just log that. Yeah.
Great. No other questions? Thank you, Martin, for that. Thank you. Pass on to Paul, please.
Thank you, Chair. On waste services, household waste collection services continue to perform well. Domestic waste tonnages remain higher than normal. Demand for bulky waste collections remain high, and bottle recycling facilities continue to be very well used. However, operational adjustments are being made as necessary to cope with these challenges. Garden waste, commercial waste and bulky waste service income is performing well and is expected to exceed targets. The garden waste service is being reviewed for next season, and teams will continue to review other collection rounds in order to cope with ongoing housing growth, as well as continued growth in the uptake of garden waste services. The grass cutting remains on target to achieve the required number of cuts in all areas, and we're currently in this area on cut 11. We are working through our normal street sweeping schedules, but we'll be moving to leaf hotspots in a month or 2 from now. So as usual, any areas that you think need doing for that, just bring them to our attention. We are starting to think about the winter works schedule. We've got the routine annual maintenance commitments, but would welcome any early requests from members on areas which you consider require attention over the coming months. And we can look at those. Our glyphosate alternative weed trial is coming to an end, and a report on the results of the trial will be produced around November time, and that report will be shared with members. The verge cutting's been completed county-wide, which was achieved within the target period of June and July. COVID continues to pose challenges for us, but we will continue to review processes and procedures as we return to normality. And finally, we are currently reviewing the assisted bulky waste collection with a view to reinstating that service. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Good, Councillor Towns, Councillor Jones. A couple of questions from myself. The trial glass collecting that was trialled in Stop Hill is being trialled. How are the figures on that, and is it going to be pushed out further?
I'll come in on that one. So we did take an update report to the local services and environment scrutiny just recently, and there's a further detailed final report coming to Cabinet in October. But fundamentally, the volume of glass that we're collecting is outweighed our expectations. It's top quartile performance of 70 odd kilos per household per year. So that would put us at the very top. The issue we have is that we expected to see some potential drop-off in the amount of bring site activity, because you would expect, you know, potentially that we're displacing material from people that are already actively recycling, and we were keen to determine whether or not that was the case. Ideally, we want people to clearly be recycling stuff that they would otherwise just put in the bin. Unfortunately, across the last 18 months, the amount of glass in our bring sites has gone up to 22%. So the actual kind of baseline is fundamentally skewed in terms of how's the trial performance. So we are looking at that, but it has been really, really successful. It's been really well received by the people involved in the trial, and certainly it's something that we'll be recommending is a definite way forward. It's really about the timing and how we roll it out in terms of the relation to government funding being available.
That's great, thanks, Paul, because I know obviously my ward, and it's all just been positive from residents. So yeah, that's great news. Second question, Paul. I've had a lot of, and I suppose Councillor Bourne will have done as well, comments from people about the state of the unswept roads, as they keep saying, in the middle of the town, Morpeth town centre. And I know the guys do a great job, but a few years ago, or until a few years ago, each shopkeeper every morning would sweep outside their own shop, and that seems to have been fallen away a bit. And I just wonder whether the council can work with somebody like the Chamber of Trade to try and encourage shopkeepers to re-sweep outside their own shops. Every little bit helps, and it helps all the guys. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Very regularly. I think they've recently been using the large sweeper, which doesn't get onto the footpaths, and that might be a perception that it's not being swept because some of the stuff on the footpath's not being picked up. But I'll look into getting the mini sweeper in there as well.
That's great, thanks, Paul. I've got Councillor Towns, Councillor Laurie as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
Just a couple of things, really. You very kindly, Paul, I think, arranged a temporary bin on the Morpeth Northern Bypass for me as a bit of a trial to see. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you can maybe have a look at that and ping me an email with what findings, if any, has it been used, really? You know, to be fair, I haven't had, since you made that arrangement, I haven't had one person complaining to me about litter and dog fouling on the path, so hopefully people are using it. I suspect maybe that's just a coincidence, but if you've got some feedback or something, and whether or not we can have a permanent installation, that would be great, and they can just feed that back to residents. The other thing is the perennial issue of weeds, and you mentioned this trial. I have no criticism of the team, and I have no criticism of the efforts that they make. And I distinctly recall in an email you sent to me, it made a very common sense point, which I must admit I hadn't really thought about, was if you're going to spray a weed, you have to let it grow first. And I have told people that. But To me, it seems to be a battle that we're losing at the moment. And I know a lot of it is, things just look bad. They're not really, it's not causing damage or harm. So it's maybe not a priority when it's just about aesthetics. But I think the problem with weeds growing in lots of places is it might not be doing much harm, and it might be an aesthetic issue, but it looks like there's neglect.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is, but it's just some feedback I've had, and I get this especially in Pegswood. And the problem with Pegswood villages is half the village is NCC's responsibility, and the other half is a mixture of Carbon, who have had some issues with their contractors in the last few years, and some private developers who still own big chunks of land, and they've let the grass grow as several feet high, and then they come and chop it, and it's just a complete mess. And of course we get it in the neck because everyone thinks it's the council rather than someone else. But looking around Morpeth as well, there was a comment on social media the other day which I kind of defended, but then driving through yesterday did think actually there are weeds on the main street, there are weeds over the bridges, outside Louis Johnson's auctioneer's house, whatever it's called now. One of the drains has got grass 6 inches high growing out of it. It does look neglected. Mm-hmm. I know that you're doing everything you can, but it's just the feedback that we've had. And I said I would raise it. I don't know if it'll make any difference to the approach that we take, or if it's just one of those things that nowadays people will just have to put up with. But I said I would raise it, so I have.
No, that's fine. I'll take that back to the team, and we'll see if there's anything we can do before the winter sets in to improve the look of things at the minute. We have had a particularly difficult season in terms of growth, which has had a knock-on effect right the way through the season. In terms of the trial, that was done in a very specific area, which wasn't in Morpeth, it was in West Sleekburn, in the Chopping area. So that wouldn't have had an effect on the weed control in the areas that you're discussing. That's simply been just the way this season's worked out. But we'll certainly have a look at it, and whether that's improving things for next year or just the fact that we've had a particularly difficult year and we haven't been able to keep on top of it with our normal resources. But
just to thank you for that, and taking the comments on board. It's meant to be constructive, but I'm sure you're much more aware of this than I am on it. But you're saying this is an unusual year. I think this is going to start being normal. I think we are getting wetter, and wetter starts to the year, drier summers with climate change. Obviously, I'm quite happy that we will adapt where possible our programmes to meet those challenges. But as I said I would mention it, so I have. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks. Hi, Paul. A couple of points from me. I think the first one is just coming in on what Councillor Towns was saying about weeds. I'm probably a lone voice on this, but I think weeds get a really bad press, and I think we need to stop calling them weeds, and I think we need to start calling them essential bee food, insect nutrition. Perception is a lot of it, and we were brought up in overly manicured lawns and gardens where we saw weeds as a bad thing. And I think now we need to start to educate the public about, unless weeds are unsafe and they're in an area where they need to be cleared, then we need to consider them part of our biodiversity, and we need to start to think about them differently. And unsightly is all about perception. So that's just a point I want to make about weeds. I'm definitely on their side. My second question is, I read a really interesting article a couple of days ago about Japanese knotweed, and now I'm terrified of it. And I just wonder, do we have any in South East Northumberland? Do we have it in the county? Is it a problem? You're all nodding. You've done this to death, haven't you? I apologise because I'm new and I didn't know that. So,
in terms of weeds, I won't get in the middle. I'll try and give a balanced deliver a balanced service. And yes, we are aware of knotweed. It is an issue, and we'll try and keep on top of it as best we can. If there's any areas where you see it, let me know.
Right. Paul?
Can I just come in and comment on weed treatment just generally, because I think weeds generally are our nemesis, and we're not alone in that, in terms of the constraints we now face in terms of, not being able to apply residual weed killing chemicals. We have to allow weeds to grow and then we kill them. Then so they do look unsightly. And I think, whilst I take on your point about biodiversity, I think having green pavements isn't where we want to be. But we also, need to get that community pride aspect and people on board because certainly myself included, I go out and I weed the weed outside my premises. If it looks bad, you go out and you just tackle it, and we really do need to encourage people to do that as well, because that's kind of something that seems to have been lost, nationally in recent years. That's certainly something that we, want to engender and put back. But as part of the trials, we have been trialling more mechanical means of weed control as well, because the key constraints we have is that if you have to allow it to grow and then you have to treat it, and then you're constrained in terms of the weather conditions you can apply the weed treatments to. It's quite easy in a wet and windy kind of start to the summer for weeds to really get hold and look a real mess. And if we've got other means of addressing them, such as mechanical extraction and things such as that, it just gives us more ammunition and more armour to attack the problem with. So then we can try and win the battle rather than just trying to defend the battle instead. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Are there any other questions for the FAR, Paul?
Chairman, you did have me before. You said my name and then you forgot me, I think.
How could I ever forget you, Councillor Jones?
Thank you. Councillor Murphy's made me feel so much better about my garden. So my question, I think, is for Paul, but it may be Martin, in which case I apologise. It's about the tree programme. I had 2 or 3 projects through John Alderton of tree removals or trimming. And one of which I got an email round about this time last year from John to say, good news is this will be completed before the end of the year. They've disappeared totally and utterly. I'm getting no response. Well, no, that's not true. The only response I've had is to say there's no trace of them. And calls aren't returned. So I just don't know where to go. It's particularly on my mind this week because I have a parish council meeting where one of them was outside the village hall, so I've got to go and face the parish council yet again. Can I ask what's happening about the tree officer and what's happening to the projects?
Let's catch up at the end, because John's moved on from the county council now when he works
Well, I know
for
that, but
Dunnes,
it's disappeared.
So I'll need to pick up with you, just see where the issues exactly are, and then follow that through for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that as well, Paul, because I need to catch up on that. Are there any other questions for Paul? No. Thanks, Paul and Martin. And if you would like to, I know you'd love to stay and hear the rest of the meeting, but please feel free to leave. And can we thank you both again, and thank the lads for all the great work you're doing through this COVID situation. It is much appreciated by us and residents. Right, Paul, local transport plan update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So obviously you've got a report. We were asked to provide an update on progress with the implementation of the local transport plan for 21-22, and also just to give a very brief update as to where we're at for the preparation involved in pulling that together for the coming financial year as well. So the report is one that we're taking around all the local area councils, that gives that county-wide overview as to how the programme's being set up and what's where we've got to date, and I'll give a little bit more detail in terms of some of the issues within the locality. But I think, first of all, is just to really set the key aspects of the programme to date, which is that you'll see from the paperwork that we actually consulted on and set a programme based on just over £19 million capital programme. That was because, in terms of the timing of the work that in which we developed the programme for the coming year, we're doing that in advance of actually having confirmation from DFT in terms of what funds have actually been allocated to the county council as part of the DFT programme and resourcing. So we did that based on a prudent estimate, fundamentally because we didn't want to go through that whole consultation process, develop a programme, only then to have to review it and take schemes out, because that's just not where we want to be. So we did that, and thankfully when DFT finally got around to letting everybody know, which was late in March, when what the figures were, we were very fortunate in getting more money than what we'd budgeted for. So we basically developed and extended some of the schemes, took forward schemes that were not in the programme but were only just not in the programme and added those in. So we built that scheme up to just over £25.6 million, and that's the one that we've been working on since that point in time. So I think the other key thing just to highlight within the report as well is that in addition to that 25.6 million, the County Council has invested £15 million of its own capital funds to an enhanced programme of maintenance on its UNC roads and footways and cycleways. And that's something that's been really helpful in terms of getting on top of some of those maintenance issues, particularly in some of the more rural areas, but also in the residential areas around footways in particular. And you'll see from the programme that there's a £5 million allocation within the current financial year involved with that. So we are making good progress despite all the issues with COVID in terms of delivering that very large capital programme. And you'll see from within the report that gives that county-wide perspective as to where we've got to county-wide. And we wanted to paint that picture because fundamentally, I think, you travel across the county. I know this is the Castle Morpeth Local Area Council, but you do travel around the county. It is a county-wide highways service, so I think it is important that you're understanding that whole picture because it gives that flavour and that breadth and depth of the scale of the activity and the complexity of some of the schemes that the County Council takes on. So you'll see within the report, we are effectively dismantling, repairing and conserving and then putting back a 200-year-old world's longest formerly suspension bridge over the River Tweed. We're doing major works on a landslip at Todsteads and done very complex geotechnical engineering works in relation to that with a scheme coming forward. There's been a whole raft of works undertaken along the Spine Road on some of the structures along there in addition to the usual activity. So there is a vast amount of work that the teams are ongoing with, both in terms of the design, the construction and also the road safety teams involved in that. In terms of the local area picture, the key areas there in terms of the integrated transport activity and the funding allocated for that, we're undertaking 55 projects within the local area, this Castle Morpeth Local Area Council. Of those, 14 are complete as at this point in time. That includes things such as the 20-mile-an-hour scheme for Cambo First School, a fairly significant and I think for a while coming scheme to improve the Barrington Corner that Councillor Foster's already made reference to, that has been one of the high-risk accident sites in recent years. We've also taken forward works on the B6309 at Stamford and to Whittledean to improve the road safety and the maintenance there, as well as a new zebra at Broadway and Darras Hall. So there's a raft of schemes that have been delivered already. There's another 5 that have gone through all of the consultation and design that have been issued to the area team. That includes works at Front Street and Linemouth and Cresswell Road at Ellington. So that's in with the area team now to programme. There's a traffic management scheme at Meadowfield and Ponteland that's getting programmed at the moment. Improved signage along the riverbank at Stakeford that's coming forward, and some works in Hebron Village and Ponteland around car parking as well. We also have another 23 schemes that are in design. These include a raft of things in terms of pedestrian and cycling improvements. So there's 3 schemes, one at Walton Manor Footway, one at Linden Way, Darras Hall, and a footpath between Ellington and Linton that's a surface upgrade that's basically in design at the moment. The safety team's also been taken forward a number of other high-risk sites. So there's a Great North Road and Blagden Lane junction, the C115 bends west of Chevington Moor, and works at Darras Road and Eastern Way Junction that are in design at the moment. The remainder, which is around about 13, I think it is, are still to be programmed within the integrated transport activities. But those are coming forward. So that includes a number of the school schemes as well that are at various stages in that design process. In terms of the highway maintenance side, there's a total of 32 projects within the Castle Morpeth area. 14 of those are complete, so that's pretty much all of the surface dressing and microsurfacing schemes that are weather dependent. We do set a really challenging programme for the microsurfacing and surface dressing teams across the county, and it is weather dependent, so if there are any impacts on weather, we do sometimes get delays for some schemes. So there are 2 of the schemes that we've had to defer into next year, And that's a surface dressing scheme at Upham to Tritlington and a microsurfacing scheme in Broadway at Daddas Hall that will be undertaken in the next financial year, just because the weather basically beat us in terms of the window of activity. There's also a number of works orders issued. So there's 9 works orders issued for schemes that have gone through the whole design process on the main maintenance activity. So these are predominantly resurfacing schemes at Benridge, Hagder, Pigden, Middleton Bank Top to Scott's Gap, North Road, Ponteland, St Mark's Street and Holland Street in Morpeth, Morpeth 30-mile-an-hour limits to East Mill, Mitford Village, Rothley Crossroads towards Longwitton, Dyke New to Meldon and Fox Covert Lane in Daddas Hall. There's a further 5 that are in design and another 2 that are just waiting to be programmed. They're just working on the briefs at the moment. So you can see from that there's a raft of activity, both in terms of things done, things going to be done in the next few months, and then a range of activity that's still in design and will be delivered. So we are still on track to deliver that whole programme in the current financial year, but we are working very hard to achieve that. And clearly we are at the behest of the gods in terms of the weather as well, so it is weather dependent, but that's where we are at this point in time. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Towns. Councillor Bourne, no.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Paul. Just one thing to raise, and then I'll have a couple of hopefully easy questions on a couple of projects. You mentioned the Chevington Moor Junction. I think that's the one that's a crossroads. Leading down from that to, I think, what's called East Farm on the road that then leads to the A1. When the opencast was restored, there was an opportunity to get a bridleway and cycleway on the, I think, still within the hedge to hedge, or still within the public highway rather than over the hedge in the field. And a resident there said it's completely overgrown and unusable, and it's a dangerous road, which is why that was put in the first place. So I did report it by email, but I've had no feedback. So just to flag with you while you're here, if we can look at just getting the cutter out or doing whatever is appropriate to make sure that track is usable. In terms of 2 LTP projects and the point about schools, Tritlington School, which is next to the A1, there was a slight delay because while the route of the new A1 was being agreed, but that was resolved quite some time ago, and I was told quite some time ago that the 30-mile-per-hour scheme outside Tritlington School was in the LTP and was going ahead, and it's never happened yet. The parish council are, understandably pretty exasperated at asking me for progress on it. I did speak to Neil last week, who said there was a meeting last Wednesday, but I haven't checked my emails today, to be fair, but I haven't seen any feedback from that meeting as to when this scheme is actually going to be implemented.
So that's one of the schemes that's still in design at the moment. So,
well, is it being redesigned? Because I was sent the design 2 years ago.
So the issue you have with a lot of the 20-mile-an-hour schemes is that they do to and fro in terms of through the consultation process, through the initial feasibility design and then into the detailed design. Right. So I'll get an update in terms of where they're at in that process for you.
That'd be great. Also, Pegswood Primary School, things happened there. Some rumble strips went in, and the rumble strips started to fall to bits. The rumble strips were taken out, but nothing's been put back in their place. And myself and the parish council there aren't clear on what's happening with the Pegswood 20-mile-per-hour scheme as well. Right. So again, if I could have some update on it that I could pass on to the parish council, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Towns. Councillor Murphy.
Hi, sorry, I didn't get where you said the scheme for Morpeth Road was, in terms of the from Morpeth Road up to Paddock Hall, there is a scheme that Councillor Ledger had funded to reduce the speed there from 50 to 40, and I understand it's been funded for a feasibility study, but I thought it was going to be implemented soon, and I'm not sure where that's at.
I'd need to come back to you on the details. What we're working on at the moment is, because I'm conscious that you have your member small schemes and you have the detailed feedback on that comes through this meeting. We're looking to do a similar kind of setup across the whole of the LTP in terms of all of the schemes in there, both in terms of member small schemes as well as the LTP schemes, including some of the key programmes around the 20-mile-an-hour schools, so that basically becomes a norm, so that rather than having to go through this process of where's the scheme at, what's the progress, we'll be able to just issue that documentation as part of the quarterly updates to the area council, so you can see and track that as it's gone forward. But as you can imagine, given the nature and the range and the amount of to and fro, we're just trying to construct that and making sure it's robust, so that you're getting accurate and robust information on a timely manner. So we'll hopefully get that out for the next quarterly meeting as well.
Thanks for that, Paul. No other questions for that, so that's great. Paul, thank you very much for your time and your answers. Last couple of things on the agenda, work programme. The only one I've got, which I would like to, myself and Leslie would like to try and bring to the, it'll be the November meeting, because the next meeting is on Monday the 11th of October, is, I believe, just planning. Obviously an update on the duelling at the A1, try and get somebody from highways there. If there's any other items you would like for your ward or for the whole Castle Morpeth area, put on the agenda. Can you please contact me, and we can see if we can get those put on. And the more input we have from yourselves, the more interesting the meeting. You've got the date of the next meeting. Urgent business, I don't have any. Leslie, was there anything?
No, Chair, I don't have any urgent.
Thanks, Leslie. So that we'll close the meeting, and thank you all for your attendance.